Amanda, thank you for that wonderful discussion. I'm a new New Zealander myself, having been awarded the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, so we'll talk more later on. They have an amazing program in New Zealand where they're trying to attract global impact leaders, and I'm just getting in awe with that government's approach towards really a small country, relatively small country, providing leadership to the world on setting policies and right goals. So thank you for that. 100%. You won't see me tweeting because here I am a technology person, but I don't use technology myself that much. And in fact, this is my presentation. Normally, so I do speak around the world. I come from a place not far from here called Singularity University. We're based in the NASA Ames Research Center. We're an institution that's devoted towards what we call exponentially changing technologies. And we speak with, advise, and change the mindsets of corporations, governments, entrepreneurs, and investors on how they can use innovative approaches to solving, that's the operative word, the world's biggest challenges, what we call global grand challenges. So I'm the faculty chair of Global Grand Challenges. I have the delight of looking at a whole portfolio of big challenges. By the way, AV, can you take that slide down as much as I love it? I have a whole portfolio of global grand challenges, from energy to environment to food to you name it. And I think about the cutting edge technologies and where they're going and how to work with corporations, investors, entrepreneurs to help them innovate. Super exciting. It's really an Alice in Wonderland world that I live in. But I'm going to tell you a story about kayaking to start off with. So as was mentioned, I love kayaking. That's my thing. So my most recent kayak was this last July, 21 days on Lake Malawi, 600 kilometers. Me and one other guy named Brent in this little tiny kayak, totally self-sufficient, and away we go paddling for 21 days. And it's just lovely. Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania. Everything was great, normal hardships that you would experience on such a paddle of paddling 10 hours a day and having to make little minor repairs and figure things out, which is what we love to do, landing in remote villages and uninhabited islands and figuring things out. 530 kilometers into the trip, of the 600-kilometer trip, we got caught in the worst storm you can possibly imagine, penned against what are called the Livingston Mountain Range, and this giant swells that were building up over hundreds of kilometers along Lake Malawi, leading up to swells that were 20, if not 30 feet high on a lake, capsizing us time after time. We capsized like 15 times, gathering our stuff, crawling back in, and having to figure out how we're going to survive on that lake until we decided we're not going to survive. We have to figure out a way to get onto shore. So we saw a very little rocky beach, and it was rocky. And being kayakers, we knew we should not try to land on that beach because waves are going to crush us. But we had no other option. So we tried, and sure enough, as we approached that beach, a couple hundred villagers are waving us off saying, "Don't come here, you're going to get wrecked." But we had to. As we approached the beach, these waves lift us up and kapow! Slam us onto these rocks, and my friend Brent, the last thing I remember, he's getting catapulted over me, landed onto the rocks, the kayak gets smashed, I get sucked down into the waves, and now I'm being sucked back out to the lake with just me and my PFD going out. And thinking, okay, now what? And next thing I know, these two super brave guys jump into their wooden wooden canoe, and they come out to rescue me. They brave these swells, come out, we meet, I get into the canoe, and I speak fluent Swahili, and this is on the Tanzanian side, and I was like, so what are we going to do? And you could see the fear and terror in their eyes, too. They said, we don't know, but we're going to try. They paddle, and the plan was paddle as fast as they can towards the shore, and then when they say jump, we're going to jump out of the canoe. That was the plan. So we did exactly that. We jump out of the canoe gets slammed against the rocks, I get slammed against the rocks, one of the fishermen does, and the other fisherman gets sucked out to the lake as well. Having risked their lives, not knowing me or my friend Brent at all. Villagers get together and they rescue this other guy, and we all end up on the shore. totally bruised and cut and hurting. A woman takes us into her home and shows us compassion and nurtures us and gets us back healthy again. The kayak is damaged beyond repair. What does this have to do with relevance to the SDGs? For me, it was a stark and raw reminder of the power of human courage and bravery and compassion. If we're to solve the SDGs, this is going to take, my friends, uncommon. Nothing that any one of us has experienced before. Uncommon and raw courage and compassion. This is not business as usual. So you probably want me to get on stage and say how great we're doing with the SDGs. And I could tell you a sweet story about how many different indicators we are making progress on the SDGs. Human life expectancy, infant mortality, literacy rates are all improving dramatically. And being at Singularity University, amongst wonderful techno-optimists, I'm inundated in it day in, day out. And I oftentimes preach that. From the likes of Peter Diamandis, one of our co-chairs of SU, and Hans Rosling, you know him. He's posthumously was produced Factfulness, which is almost like a parlor game of testing how much you and the well-informed scientists think and have a bias towards us not recognizing how much the world is improving. So he asked questions like, what's the human life expectancy now? Any guesses? Globally. Any guesses? 70 years. How much has poverty reduced in the last 20 years? Extreme poverty. Half. All right? A 30-year-old man in the world, on average, has attended school for 10 years of his life. How many years of school has a 30-year-old woman attended in her life? Globally. 9. We're making tremendous progress in the world. And yet, at the same time that's happening, the Union of Concerned Scientists tells us with their Doomsday Clock, you might have heard this Doomsday Clock, it's ticking and they've put it closer to midnight than it ever has been since 1953 because of instability around nuclear war and climate change. And we have new challenges coming. As you approach the building today, you might have seen some picketers not far from here. Did you notice what was on their sign? I went and kind of joined in with them this morning. I like it when people activate. That turns me on in a weird way because there's people standing up for issues. But one of their placards says, one job should be enough. And I'm thinking to myself, and this says nothing in a patrilineal way to that group of people. Really, 5, 10, 15 years from now, the placard will say, one job would be nice. Because technological unemployment is coming. Maybe not unemployment, but technological disruption of our employment systems is definitely coming. So we have some uphill battles that we have to face. Not least of which, as was noted, Sunday's Earth-Shattering Report from the Ipcc. This has got me rethinking everything. Johan Rockstrom is a dear friend and colleague of mine. He's been warning me in a personal way for years. But now we have the Ipcc telling us, look, we've got till 2030. That's 12 years from now to get our act together to keep our global temperature within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Else we experience extreme climate events, fire, sea level rises, human migration, et cetera, et cetera. We've got 12 years, my friends. This is not business as usual. I know what fire is like. California's largest fires ever just burned down where I came from in Northern California. I know what sea level rise is like. I live in Zanzibar, and I have a house on the beach. And I've seen over the last 10 years how sea level is rising there and eroding the sands. Not just for me as a privileged person living in that village, but for all the people there in the village. And what's it doing to them? By the way, I definitely want to find out about that technology around seawall construction. And I know famine. Unfortunately, I've seen famine up close and personal. I'm the person who's actually created the global standard for classifying famines in the world, and I'm on a 4-person committee that makes the call as to whether or not a country is in famine. So not only do I look at that statistically, but I go to these places and I see people dying to death. Dying to death. Dying from starvation. And now the Ipcc is telling me that by 2030, if we don't get our act together as a world, we're going to see this more fires, more sea level rise, more famine, et cetera, costing in the order of dozens of trillions of dollars. This is not business as usual. The quote that came out most profoundly for me from the Ipcc report was this quote that said, this is going to require unprecedented transformation in all aspects of society. Whoa. These are scientists from around the world landing on that statement. Unprecedented transformation in all aspects of society. That means business, that means technology, that means our economic systems, that means our governance systems. I take that literally because I know, as a NASA researcher and as a person who's on the front lines of these issues, I know that's what it's going to take. Well, it so happens that where we are right now, with exponentially changing technology, it is driving unprecedented transformation in all aspects of society. What do I mean by exponential technology? You might have heard not far from here, Gordon Moore came up with Moore's Law. Working with Intel in the early 1960s, he realized that they're able basically to double computing power every 18 months. And then he used that understanding to project out where computing power was going to go. Well, Moore has been pretty much spot on. And then comes in our other co-founder of Singularity University, a man by the name of Ray Kurzweil. And he says, actually, this is not just about silicon computing. This is about all digital information. And Ray Kurzweil coined something called the law of accelerating returns, which means any technology which becomes digital is subject to accelerating returns. Basically, in its price performance, it will effectively double every year or 2 years or something like that. The actual algorithm doesn't matter. It's an exponential function. I know I've probably lost you on the maths because it's been a long time since you've done your maths, but let's do a little mental exercise to drive home the difference between exponential growth and linear growth. Because we humans have been trained to think linearly when our world is changing exponentially. What does that mean? If you go outside and you take 30 steps, big old steps, you'll roughly go 30 meters, right? If you take 30 exponential steps, meaning 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 4, 4 is 8, etc. How far will you go? Anyone want to hazard a guess? You'll go 1 billion meters. You'll go 26 times around the planet. Why is that important? I've told you, we humans, even futurists, even experts who think about these things, are programmed internally to think linearly. Last year's change will pretty much equal this year's change, will pretty much equal next year's change. That's not what's going on with any technology which becomes digital technology. Therefore, if you are an investor, a corporation, an entrepreneur, a business person, a government who's thinking linearly about the future, you will metaphorically go 30 meters when someone over here is going to go 26 times around the planet with their thinking, with their accuracy on their investments, accuracy on what Buckminster Fuller calls anticipatory design, anticipating where things are going and designing for that. That's the magic of an exponential thinker. So what does this mean? We see it in artificial intelligence, computing, of course. You're computing what's in your phone is as powerful as anything that was on a supercomputer in the past. Artificial intelligence is getting to be indistinguishable with humans, and it won't be too far off when it is. You might have seen the demonstration of Google's Assistant AI recently. It got a lot of press because they actually had to make it sound, they had to identify it as a computer because it was so indistinguishable. And it's a conversation between an AI, unassisted AI, and a human making a hair appointment for a woman. And the AI is back and forth with her, and she does not know she's talking to an AI. And the AI even has these little pauses and ums and let me check. It even says these kinds of things. That's today's technology. What I'm offering you to think about is not the wonder and awe of everything you read about today, but apply an exponential mindset and see where that's going with regards to digital biology and our ability to treat your DNA code like computer code, using techniques like CRISPR, which allows us to cut, edit, and replace our genetic code as we wish to create some really wonderful things like rice, which can grow in salt water, or wild berries that were never edible before, which are now edible, or treating cancer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all kinds of other ethical issues, or digital manufacturing, our ability to 3D print everything smaller than you can even see with your human eye, right on up to a whole apartment buildings and houses which are being 3D printed for $1,000 in less than 24 hours. And the list of technologies go on and on and on. The other key insight that came from Singularity University's other co-founder, Peter Diamandis, was if this technology makes scarce resources more abundant, we are on the brink of living in an era of abundance. Indeed, our entire, not just our economic system is up for change, but all of our resource systems, the way we get our food, meat from, not from animals, meat from what's called in vitro meat, growing that in a sterile lab, or meat from plant-based proteins, actually not meat, but meat-like substances produced from plant-like proteins. This technology is already out there. You might have had an Impossible Burger. White Castle, the food chain, just recently announced that they're going to put the Impossible Burger on their menu. Why is that important? Because meat is so environmentally damaging. Leave alone propagating disease, leave alone killing billions and billions of sentient beings every year. I say that as a meat eater. I'm not getting on a high horse, but I know that it needs transformation. To our learning systems, XPRIZE just finished doing a XPRIZE competition in Tanzania where the challenge was to have an AI teach illiterate, ill-numerate children how to read and do maths without the aid of a human within 1 year. And they succeeded to great meeting their own metrics. So what happens when a child anywhere on the planet has access to a smart device, which they will, has access to the internet, which they will? In the next few years, billions of new people are going to be coming online. He or she can get access to education, not necessarily from a teacher who has to be trained 5 to 7 years and doesn't show up in class. I know that because I used to be a teacher and I know what happens. I showed up for class all the time in this Kenya rural village where I taught as a Peace Corps volunteer. But now that child can get expert, personalized learning. What happens with healthcare when you can get personalized diagnostics? What happens with shelter when we can build homes for less than $1,000 in less than 24 hours. We are on the brink of an era of abundance. In fact, I would say that we are in an innovation boom time. Any of you from California? I'm from California. The gold rush massively transformed this area with this idea that here are all these riches to be had. The riches to be had now are innovation and solving the world's biggest challenges. We are truly in a boom time. For investors, the Council on Foreign Relations estimates that by the year 2030, to solve the SDGs, it will require an investment of new money of $100 trillion. I said T. $100 trillion. That comes from the UN Council on Foreign Relations. So if you're an investor, this is boomtown. If you're a government, this is boom time. Because not only do governments have the opportunity to make services much more efficient, but governments have nations and governments have an opportunity to completely transform themselves. So you might have heard recently, Switzerland declared themselves Crypto Valley, open for business if you want to be a blockchain company. The government of Rwanda said, we're open for business if you want to be a drone company. So countries are now going to be competing for investment and for thought leadership. It's a whole new game going on. If you're a corporation, you might have seen the predictions that 40% of all S&P corporations will not exist in 10 years. 40%. Because they're slow in innovation and they cannot change and they're not nimble fast enough. So it's not an option if you're a corporation to jump into this boomtown. And if you're an entrepreneur, what a wonderful time to exist. Just think about a problem, think about exponential technology or a new business model that's emerging because of blockchain or new ways to share value. Mash those things together and you've got your new business, your new entrepreneur endeavor. So how am I feeling right now? I'm feeling angry. I say that with a smile on my face, but I actually am feeling angry after reading the Ipcc report. We've known this. This is not new. This has been throughout my lifetime, my cognizant lifetime, this warning has been called. This is the last call. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm hopeful. I'm in wonder and awe of this technological era that we're in. And mostly, I'm going to invoke an Obama term. I'm fired up. I'm super fired up. I'm rethinking all of my prejudices. I had a conversation earlier during tea. I am literally rethinking everything. Just this weekend, I stumbled into I didn't stumble in, I might have stumbled out, to a bar. A random bar. I said, let me go. I go to places sometimes just to go places I've never been to open my mind. I'm sitting there watching a football game, the San Francisco 49ers, drinking my little beer. And there's another gentleman, basically white, my same age, sitting next to me. And we're doing like men talk, throw down a beer and comment on how that terrible ref, et cetera, doing your thing. And we're kind of bonding over that, over random murmuring. And then he says, yeah, the San Francisco 49ers, they spent $20 million on a quarterback, and he's not even showing up because he got injured. And this second-string quarterback, he sucks. Yeah. And I said, yeah, well, maybe it's time to pull up Colin Kaepernick. And he says, if they pull up Colin Kaepernick, I'll never watch football again. So here you see these two guys, almost mirror images of each other. Everything was cool until all of a sudden we realized we come from very different perspectives on social justice. I don't know if you saw Nike's ad. Thumbs up to Nike. Very different issues on social justice. And at that moment, I thought to myself, okay, I could lay into this guy, or I could listen. And I chose the latter, and I listened. I didn't defend. I didn't try to argue my point at all. And he told me his perspective. And I listened, and I just absorbed it. Challenging, the whole time thinking, where might I have gotten my issues and prejudices wrong? And then he invited me to do the same thing. And he listened. What we need now from Silicon Valley, from innovators, especially people who are reaching high to change the world, you have an equally strong responsibility to listen and to challenge your assumptions, apply exponential thinking, and reprogram yourself so that we can actually achieve not just solving the SDGs, addressing climate change and making the world a better place. Thank you all very much. All right, so you heard me rant. Let me hear y'all rant. Open for comments, questions. This is why I'm angry and I'm frustrated and I'm concerned. But I'm hopeful because I also know that all of those systems that are driving that are up for transformation. Transformation beyond what exists right now. We're talking, blockchain is going to completely transform our finance systems. It's going to create new economic models for people to self-organize and to create value in and amongst themselves. Our foods, I go on and on. But each one of those systems is up for transformation. I look at those problems, I do get concerned. And I spend time literally in the field experiencing that firsthand. I know what the sounds are like. I know what the smells are like. I know what the misery is like. So I'm not some techno-optimist, high-flying in the sky. I'm applying logic, and the logic here is how exponentially changing technology is radically going to transform everything. So the challenge for all of us who are concerned about these problems is we have to think about, in your particular domain, whatever that is, for you to anticipate those changing technologies and apply them and invest them, etc. Because otherwise we are effed. So I would start off absolutely that we all have a personal responsibility to change the way that we live, right? I'm looking forward to the session on that particular approach myself. So I don't want to take anything away from that. But at the same time, just thinking about energy. In 1 hour, the amount of energy that hits our planet from our sun is enough to power humanity's entire needs for an entire year. In 1 hour. And this doesn't take up a whole lot of space on planet Earth. If I showed you one of the graphs, one of the pictures I normally show in a presentation. It's little tiny spots in selected parts with solar energy. Just 1 hour of the sun's energy. Leave alone all the other innovations with wind and, yes, nuclear and algae and whatnot. So when I put that lens on, we can radically change our energy systems to be able to achieve zero carbon energy production for our needs and many, many, many times over. When I put an exponential technology lens on our food systems are incredibly wasteful. And we all know, and you've heard this before, we grow enough food to feed everyone on this planet, more than enough food, but we don't because of our political economic systems the way they are, and we waste something like 1/3 of our food as it is. I already mentioned the meat industry is ripe for disruption. Do you think the meat industry, and I talk to people in the meat industry, so I can say this, do you think people in the meat industry realize how radically they're going to be disrupted in the next 10, 15 years? They don't. They're the equivalent of what we call the Kodak moment. The Kodak invented the digital camera. A guy named Steve Sasson walked into the board of directors with this giant box, ugly-looking thing and plopped it down and said, "This is the future of photography." And the board of directors, being all smarty that they are, said, "No, that thing's too big. It costs too much. It's tens of thousands of dollars, and the pixel resolution is terrible. And anyways, we're in the paper cleaning business." Well, what happened to Kodak? Boom. Next to bankruptcy. At the same time that new startups came up like Instagram and get these billion-dollar valuations within a year because they applied exponential technology. Our water systems are up for transformation. We live on a blue planet. Just happens to be saline water, and the price and energy requirement to desalinate our water is going down tremendously, leave alone being able to extract water from our atmosphere. MIT came up with a material using nanotechnology, which is hyper-absorbent. It can absorb in 20% humidity. That's basically desert-like environments. So maybe the future of the home isn't these pipes that go to the home, but this absorbent material. I go on, again, right on down the list of our global challenges and how each one of those is being transformed. It does require personal responsibility, but our whole systems are changing. Governments definitely have a role, but governments are going to have to play catch-up because there's going to be a competition amongst governments in the future. And I think I'm probably running out of it. I'm just going to look to you and tell me when to stop. Stop? Okay.